She cheated with our friend, tried to take everything. In court I exposed their scheme and won. My name is Juan, and right now everything feels off balance, like a film playing one frame ahead of me. This morning the house is too quiet, a mug abandoned on the counter, slippers not put away, the TV paused mid-show. Standing in the kitchen, I realize something my heart refuses to accept. Carla is seeing Marcos. Not a fling, not a mistake, something steady that grows in the spaces I thought were ours. That moment hits me like a small, sudden earthquake of facts that tilt everything I believed about my marriage. We were married for more than 10 years. She and I were together for 5 years before that, which means most of my adult life is built around her. The quiet Sunday mornings, the late-night playlists, the way she learned my coffee order better than I did. When you love someone for so long, you forget that love is also a choice, a thing that needs tending. I believed our foundation was solid. I believed we were a team. I remember how I met Carla at university. She was at a corner table with a stack of books and a laugh that split a gloomy lecture hall into light. I walked up because I needed to borrow a pen and left with a phone number and a plan to see her again. I remember our wedding, a small ceremony with our closest friends, and how during the vows I thought the world had arranged itself perfectly. I remember our honeymoon, lazy stretches of sand, too much sunscreen, and nights that felt like they would never end. Those memories sit in my chest now like ache and evidence at once. My lawyer tells me to slow down, to not let anger make decisions for me. Keep your head, he says with the professional calm of someone who has seen dozens of couples become numbers on a spreadsheet. He tells me not to post anything, not to talk to mutual friends, not to sign anything until we have all the facts. He says words like equitable distribution and marital versus separate assets, as if they are neutral, as if numbers can't be loaded with meaning. He recommends patience, but patience at this moment feels like a test of endurance. At first I tell myself it might be temporary. Maybe it's something muddled and small that will burn out. Then I find the messages, photos of them at places we used to go together, snapshots of shared meals with jokes that used to be mine. The messages are threaded with an intimacy that takes time to build, not furtive and hidden, but steady, like a second life constructed next to mine. I replay that discovery in my head, searching for patterns, for a moment I missed. The first honest reaction is anger. It hits like a hand across the face. Underneath that, slower and colder, is humiliation. I realize how many times I excused unexplained weekends away, accepted late texts as harmless. I count the moments I let doubt slide because being the trusting husband felt easier than confrontation. That generosity suddenly reads to me as gullibility. Swallowing that is sharp and persistent. I keep doing what I have to do. I meet the kids' schedules. I go to work. I answer emails. I make sure the bills are paid. Every day I sit at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a coffee I don't taste, drafting lists of assets and memories, trying to separate what is mine, what is ours, and what is clutter. I write down dates of purchases, mortgage papers, photos, anything that might matter later. The act of cataloging feels like both protection and indictment. People reach out. Some send messages of sympathy, others offer clumsy advice to move on or to distract myself. I appreciate them, but their suggestions sometimes feel like a protocol from another life. My friends mean well, but they don't live inside the archive of tiny moments I already lost. They don't know the names of the private jokes that now sound like evidence. In meetings with my lawyer, we talk strategy. He recommends quiet investigation, gather timestamps, bank records, travel logs. He asks about transfers, about vacations paid with which card, about the small things that can add up. When he says plan, it lands heavy. The idea that this might be more than an affair, that it could be a coordinated strategy to position themselves advantageously in a divorce, is a particular kind of fear. It makes me watch every detail. Nights are the worst for wandering through the apartment as a guest trying to map a territory that used to be my home. In the bedroom, I see the bookshelf she curated, shirts we argued about replacing, the sofa where we planned our first apartment. Some threads are physical, others invisible. Love wove them tight, and now some fray into potential evidence. Grief sits under the anger. I grieve the person I thought I knew, the future we planned, quiet evenings, retirement talks, the small rituals that felt eternal. Grief arrives in small moments. A song on the radio that used to be ours, a sweater that still smells faintly of her perfume, the silence at 2 a.m. Sometimes grief is louder than anger, sometimes it is a hollow ache that becomes a companion. I become obsessed with timelines. I build sequences in my head, where she was in May, what she told me when she said she was working late in October. I try to lawfully rationalize love into a ledger of dates and accounts. My mind fills with taped-up index cards, each one a tiny accusation or a small defense. I know obsessing won't change the facts, but it feels like a way to make the chaos legible. A friend suggests a direct conversation. I agree because I want to hear her voice explain itself. The talk is awkward, full of rehearsed lines and long pauses. She speaks with a cadence that once charmed me. It's almost unbearable to hear softness when the words are so sharp. I ask questions. Why? How long? Is there anything salvageable? She answers in ways that sound curated, like someone reading from a prepared script. Her answers don't land like truth. In private, I comb through old photos, turning memory into a kind of archive. There is a photo from a balcony during our honeymoon where she looks at me like I'm the only person in the world. I trace that expression with my finger on the screen until the glass fogs with my breath. Reconciling that smile with the person I now suspect of betrayal is painful. Micro-interactions sting. A barista calls out our old coffee order with a smile and a familiarity that cuts. The world keeps spinning. People move through their routines, unaware that for me an emotional map has been redrawn. Moving through public spaces with a private wound is a peculiar kind of exposure. Practicalities take on new weight. The lawyer wants a paper trail. Notebooks become evidence. Credit card statements become testimony. Receipts acquire gravity. I create a digital folder called Case, and drop into it messages, photos, notes, little capsules I might need later. The mundane becomes crucial. I never thought the everyday would become so decisive. At work, I perform normalcy. It's remarkable how well one can simulate composure while the inner life rearranges. Meetings test my concentration. I laugh sometimes at jokes that don't land. Colleagues notice I'm quieter. Some offer time off. I decline because structure helps. Routine keeps the day from becoming one long spiral. What terrifies me most is not just the betrayal, it's the financial possibility. Carla has spoken casually about dividing things fairly, and the word sits in conversations like a plan. My lawyer warns that long marriages sometimes favor the spouse who stayed home or invested in ways courts value differently. I didn't consider that love and legal definitions could diverge so painfully. So I prepare. I photocopy accounts, mortgage statements, and vehicle registrations. I find old emails about purchases and map who bought what and when. Going through our life with a magnifying glass reveals purchases I don't recall and debts I accepted. I find sticky notes with quick loving messages that now feel like relics in an investigation. Some nights I imagine future scenarios. Carla leaves, Carla stays, a mediated settlement, a judge deciding what's fair. In some futures I protect much of what I built, in others the outcome is less kind. The uncertainty is a pressure that tightens daily. Places we once shared take on new shading. Our favorite restaurant now feels compromised by the thought of them sitting in our booth. Familiar spaces change when the memory layer has been repainted with the knowledge of betrayal. It is a subtle kind of erasure. I decide dignity matters. I don't want to become the caricature of a bitter ex. I want to be strategic, not vengeful. If justice is on my side, I want it delivered through facts and calm procedure, not spectacle. The impulse to make them hurt flashes through me sometimes, but I think of the children, of reputation, of consequences. I swallow that heat and choose patience, a strange form of power that can feel like exile. I build small backups for peace, calls with my parents, weekend runs, time with friends who listen without prescribing. I try to sleep, though it comes in fits. I eat poorly one day and better the next. It's messy, it's real, it's survival. I ask myself how I missed the signs. Was it trust or cowardice? Was I so comfortable I stopped looking? Or did I want to believe so badly that evidence didn't matter? Likely it's a mixture. People are not perfect censors of betrayal. I'm deliberately reserving some details. Not everything should be exposed now. There are transactions to trace, people to interview, dates to verify. There are threads I will pull later. How long the affair really lasted, what role marital assets played, whether this was a deliberate plan to isolate and take. I will reveal those carefully in future updates. For now, I stand in the kitchen with a cold cup of coffee, a folder labeled Case, and a heart that swings between boiling and breaking. I'm learning legalese while learning to grieve, cataloging proof while cataloging memories. I don't know how much I may have to give away or what will remain mine. I do know I will fight to keep what I can, not only for money but for the life I built. Tonight I lock the door and walk away for a while to clear my head. I meet a friend for a late walk and talk in small circles around the truth. He listens with the soft concentration of someone who knows tears are not always needed, sometimes presence is enough. When I come back, I write this down like a ledger for memory. Writing helps me order chaos. It helps me remember who I was before the shock, and who I might be afterward. I end the night both exhausted and oddly relieved to have translated a day's rawness into words. This is not the ending, not yet. It is the first page of a chapter one never wanted to read, and I will continue to write it in the days to come. I discovered Carla was seeing Marcos and I began to document everything: messages, photos, receipts, travel dates. I met with a lawyer, opened a folder labeled case, and tried to balance dignity with the need to protect what is mine. The divorce has started, investigations are underway, and the world I knew has been reclassified into evidence and memories. I'm exhausted, but I am still standing. Divorce proceeds in rhythms that feel both bureaucratic and intimate. There are forms to sign, deadlines to meet, and rooms where neutral people sit with clipboards while we speak about our lives like case histories. At first I trusted the advice I was given: collect evidence, stay calm, avoid public drama. But what the law records and what the heart remembers are two different languages. Judges and mediators listen for patterns, not only for single acts. They parse testimony about who cooked, who deferred career moves, who managed the home. Tiny facts that sit beside bank statements and suddenly matter. Mediation feels like performing an intimate autobiography in small installments. Carla and I sit across from each other, the mediator a cautious bridge between us. We read through lists, assets, accounts, purchases, shared expenses. There are moments when her voice sounds exactly like the woman I married. Soft inflections, the little laugh that used to disarm me, and for a second everything unravels and becomes personal again. Then the mediator asks a question about bank statements, and that tenderness recedes into document review. Early on, despite the evidence I kept, I am shocked to learn that some initial assessments suggest Carla could claim a large share of the marital estate. It is not always about blame. Courts look at duration of marriage, the standard of living established during the marriage, and the contributions, monetary and non-monetary, each person made to the partnership. The house, purchased during our marriage, is especially vulnerable. Home is not just wooden nails in the law's eyes, it becomes a financial artifact whose value may be divided. There are also tactics I did not expect. In depositions, Carla offers a composed narrative. She emphasizes support, caregiving, time she claims to have put the marriage before personal advancement. Those claims are framed in ways that sound sincere: dates where she stayed home to care for an ailing relative, decisions to turn down job opportunities for the family's stability. When relayed in court language, those memories become evidence of contribution, and the human story reshapes legal angles. I remember how we met in college. Late nights in the library arguing about a philosophy article, her shoes tucked under the chair, a laugh that made a bad lecture feel bearable. We were young and naive, but we built habits that became our scaffolding: splitting rent, arguing about the most efficient way to cook rice, slow Sunday mornings with bad coffee. Those mundane habits later multiplied into a shared life. I think of our wedding, small and bright, friends gathered around, the way she walked up the aisle, and how I felt like I was making the only right choice of my life. Our marriage had rituals that I took for granted: the way she left notes in my briefcase, the home-cooked dinners when work was brutal, the way she defended my oddities to friends. For years I felt wildly, simply in love. That love does not vanish overnight. It complicates every legal decision I now make because affection and memory are stubborn facts that coexist with bank statements and property titles. As the proceedings develop, new facts emerge that are worse than the initial shock. The affair with Marcos is not recent and small, it appears to have run parallel to our marriage for years. Timestamps on messages, travel bookings that align with times she told me she had study groups, and matched locations suggest a long pattern. There are expense records that, once traced, show payments routed through secondary accounts or described under ambiguous labels. When you map it all, the story looks less like a single mistake and more like a sustained parallel life built in the shadows of our visible one. Even colder is the indication that Carla and Marcos coordinated financially in ways that suggest planning. Shared expenses disguised as separate purchases, transfers that moved value between accounts at crucial moments, and an apparent effort to maintain our public life while quietly positioning assets. These patterns add a strategic dimension to the betrayal. If they aim to present a united, stable home to the outside world while secretly building a separate economic arrangement, then the law might view those moves differently. I push back. We hire a forensic accountant to trace transfers and an investigator to corroborate the timeline. We issue subpoenas for financial records. I sit through meetings where specialized language, commingled funds, constructive trust, equitable tracing becomes ordinary. The investigator brings back logs that show repeated meetups. At times, I was led to believe she was working late. The accountant traces subtle payment routes that previously had sounded like innocent reimbursements. Each new piece of data is another tile in an unfolding mosaic. Emotionally, the evidence arrives in waves. When a new document confirms a suspicion, part of me feels vindicated, a small reparation of truth. But that vindication is brittle. It does not heal the nights I replayed our happiest moments and felt them dissolve. Instead, each factual confirmation stiffens my resolve to see the process through. I want the ledger of our life to reflect what actually happened, not just what was visible. Carla's legal strategy counters with a narrative about sacrifice and caretaking. Her attorney frames her decisions as choices she made for the family's well-being. The unpaid work that kept the home functioning, the emotional labor that supported my career, the postponements of personal ambition to maintain family balance. Courts pay attention to those human elements. A judge may weigh testimony about who organized daily life as heavily as bank transfers. Those arguments complicate what feels like a straightforward accounting. We find small victories and real setbacks. We win permission to access particular communication logs. We lose a preliminary motion to freeze certain assets. Negotiations over appraisal values begin to feel absurdly consequential. An appraiser's estimate can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars shifting from one column to another. I learn how legal definitions and numerical valuations can bend the course of a life, and how patience in argument can become as important as intensity. On the social front, people shift allegiances. Some friends become distant, unsure how to navigate shared histories and new fractures. Others offer quiet, steady support. The network that once orbited my marriage rearranges. Dinner invitations dim, group chats grow quieter, and mutual friends adopt cautious neutrality. That social loss is subtle but deep. It feels like a second casualty. Still, I hold on to things that matter to me beyond the courtroom. I meet an old professor who helps me reframe our university memories as part of my identity, not merely as ammunition. He encourages me to preserve certain artifacts, letters, ticket stubs, photographs, not for litigation alone but as a record of what I once cherished. That counsel helps me separate the human archive from the legal dossier. The forensic team reports that the transfer patterns present a plausible legal theory. If we can show intentional diversion of marital value into constructs meant to appear separate, we may be able to contest attempts to classify those assets as wholly Carla's. Joint intent is their phrase. It is not a guarantee of victory, it is merely a legal avenue we can pursue. But it shifts the dynamic from passive fear to active strategy. Even with that glimmer, nights are still hard. I go through old messages and wince at moments of unawareness. I ask myself whether I missed signs or simply allowed trust to preempt scrutiny. Maybe both. People do not always live in maximal honesty, sometimes they live in economies of omission. My job now is to convert that omission into a record that the law will take seriously. Tonight I sit with a folder of documents and a photo album from our honeymoon. The pictures show sunlit days and laughing faces. I allow myself to remember without weaponizing those memories. Love was real and large in ways that are painful and true. I am tired, but not defeated. I am choosing to channel grief and anger into organized steps that might restore fairness. I will continue to gather records, prepare for expert testimony, and argue appraisals and intent. There is more work ahead: depositions, final mediations, and the possibility of a judge's decision. For now I close my folder, lay the photographs gently back in their sleeve, and make notes for tomorrow. I sleep with a resolve that has softened from immediate fury into a steady, quieter determination that feels like a kind of endurance. I traced the affair back further than I imagined, and the investigation revealed patterns that looked like planning, not just passion. Carla and Marcos had years of coordinated choices, financial transfers, hidden trips, parallel lives. Mediation showed how fragile even facts can be when wrapped in human stories. Despite small wins and losses, I began to shift from raw fury into steady determination. Now the case is nearing its conclusion, and the final shape of my life is about to be drawn. The last stretch of the divorce feels like waiting for a verdict that will decide more than money. It will decide how I remember the last decade of my life. The evidence our team gathered has weight. The accountant's reports are thick with detail, the investigator's notes precise. They show that for years, Carla and Marcos were not only together but quietly funneling resources in ways that set them up at my expense. It wasn't only infidelity, it was strategy. In court, the presentation is clinical. Charts, timelines, and statements are laid out in neat lines. The legal team speaks in measured voices. But behind each figure is a memory, a trip I thought was work, a purchase I thought was for us, a message that seemed trivial but wasn't. Watching it all presented as evidence feels like watching my own life turned into a documentary, stripped of warmth, reduced to exhibits. Carla sits across from me, her face a mask of composure. Marcos is not in the courtroom, but his shadow is everywhere. His name on bank transfers, his initials in correspondence, his presence threaded through years of deception. The judge listens carefully, sometimes leaning forward, sometimes scribbling notes. When the accountant explains the transfer pattern, I see the judge's expression harden. That moment gives me hope. The ruling, when it comes, is almost anticlimactic. After months of tension, it's delivered in calm, steady words. The court does not accept Carla's claim to a large portion of my assets. The documented pattern of collusion undermines her credibility. She will not receive the half she sought. Instead, the division is modest, fair in the court's eyes, but far less than she expected. I walk out of the courtroom not victorious in celebration, but freed from a weight that had pressed down for months. Relief washes through me, but it's not simple. Victory has a strange taste when it comes from exposing the person you once loved most. I wanted justice, and I got it. But justice is cold comfort compared to the warmth I once believed in. I don't feel like celebrating, I feel like sitting quietly, breathing, letting my body understand that the fight is over. That night I pack a bag. The apartment feels like a museum of ghosts. Every corner has a memory, every shelf a reminder. I call my parents and tell them I'm coming to visit. They don't ask questions, they just tell me they'll be waiting. I book a one-way ticket. On the plane, I stare out the window as the city shrinks below me. I think about the years spent building a life that turned out to be fragile. I think about the love I gave freely, and the betrayal that grew in its shadow. I think about how much energy I poured into defending what was mine, and how even winning leaves scars. But I also think about survival. About the fact that I stood my ground, gathered strength, and faced the storm without letting it break me. I know I will carry the ache for a long time, but I also know it won't define me. When I land, my parents are there. My father clasps my shoulder, my mother pulls me into her arms. For the first time in months, I feel like I can rest. This chapter is closed, not neatly, not painlessly, but closed. I don't know exactly what comes next. Maybe a new city, maybe a new career path, maybe just quiet mornings until I'm ready to build again. But I know one thing with certainty: betrayal took years of my life, but it did not take my will to keep moving. I leave the courthouse, the city, and the marriage behind, and I step into whatever comes next with the conviction that I will heal, slowly but surely. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Thanks for your attention.